So today I said we'll begin variadic functions, right? In the previous class we've talked about function pointers and we've seen the importance of function pointers as well. So I said today we are going to talk about variadic functions. So firstly, what do you understand by variadic functions? We all know that when we define a function, either of a return type int, character, or a pointer to a character, a pointer to an int, whatever the return type is, we know that we define the type of or the number of arguments that function is going to take. For instance, if I am to write a function to add two numbers, right? So from the definition of my function or from the declaration of the function, that's the function prototype, I will define that, okay, this function is supposed to take in two arguments, right? I will specify int, comma int. That means that it's going to take two argument of integer type. Same thing as char. If I define the function and in the function parameter I define that it's going to take a character, then that function is going to take a character, right? So in case of variadic function, the thing is a bit different. Okay, so in variadic function, what variadic function actually is that it is a function that takes in a variable number of argument. It takes in any number of argument you pass to it, any number of argument. Okay, so like I explained earlier, I said in case of other functions, we used to define how many parameters the function should take, right? But in case of this variadic function, you can define any number of parameter. It can take it can take any number of parameter, any number of argument. So that's variadic function in a simple explanation. That's just what variadic function is. Yes, so we said normally if we do something like int, let's say I have sum, the function name, right? Let's say the function name is sum, and then int, comma int. We all know what this is, right? This is just a function declaration here. We all know that this function here, sum, is going to take in two parameters, right? It is going to take in two parameters as what? As a function argument, right? So in this case, there is no way you can pass three arguments to this function. It will give you an error prompting you that it is expecting two arguments and you're passing three arguments. Also, you cannot pass one argument to this function. It will still prompt you an error. It is expecting two arguments, but you're passing a single argument to it. So that will give you an error. So this is where variadic functions come into play. Let me just open the terminal so that we just do something there. Okay, let me create a repository. Let me call it variadic. Good. All right. So let me create a test file to test all these things here. So hash include stdio.h. Oops. Yeah. So normally, like I said, if we do something like int sum here, we pass in int, comma int. We all know what this is. This function is going to take in two parameters, right? If I do something like int sum int, comma int, comma int, this function can take in three parameters, right? And there is no way you can change this. The moment you've defined it, there is no way you can change it until you come back to the function prototype and then remove this. For instance, if you want to make it to accept only two arguments, so you have to change all this thing. So variadic function allows you to, like I said, variadic function allows you to kind of pass any number of arguments to your function, any number of argument, right? Any number of argument. So example now, if we use if I have printf, yes, printf like this. If I say this is a trial, for instance, we all know what this is going to print, right? And if I like as well, I can pass in another parameter of type integer to it. If I like, I will pass another parameter of type char to it. I can also pass another parameter, sorry, what's this? I can also pass another parameter of type string to it. I can also pass another parameter of type float to it, right? I can just define all these things here. Char, this is just f, this is string, let me just say alx, and this is float, let me call this 1.5. So we all know what this is going to say. This is valid, right? This is valid. So printf here is a simple example of a variadic function, because as you can see here, it takes what? It takes variable number of arguments. It takes in what? A decimal. it takes in a character, it takes in a string, it takes in a float, and we all know that this is definitely going to be printed. This is not an invalid declaration or an invalid function definition here. We all know what this is going to do. So printf is an example of a variadic function. Whatever argument you pass to it, printf is going to get it printed. As far as you've specified the type and or the placeholder, it's going to get it printed for you. So that is a simple example of variadic function, a printf. So example now, or before that, how do we create these variadic functions here? To create a variadic function, the syntax is not the same as in the case of our normal functions that we used to create. The syntax is a bit different in this case. Okay, so to create a variadic function, all you need to do is define the return type int. Now, for instance, let's say my function is sum here. So here, in the bracket here, your function is supposed to take at least one argument. Okay, at least one argument. So if I should do something like, let's say int arg like this, or let me say, let me leave it as int arg. I mean argument. That arg means argument. So if I should do something like int arg here, this is going to tell the function the number of parameters I'm trying to pass to the function. So you have the right to tell the function that, okay, I'm passing 5 parameters to it. Okay, I'm passing 10, I'm passing 20 parameters. You can tell the function all that. So here you put a comma and then a dot here. So this is a definition of a variadic function here. So this means that your function or your parameter are variable. It can take any number of arguments here. That's just what this dot is saying here. This int arg here, like I said, the first parameter is just trying to tell the function that I am passing 20 argument to my function. For instance, if I should do something like this now, if I should say int sum, let's say the function has been defined, the sum function has been defined. Let's say I'm trying to call the function now. If I say sum here, if I pass in 4, 2, 4, 5 like this, and then 8, for instance. So what the first parameter here is saying is that, okay, I am passing 4 parameters to the function here. That's just what this first item here is saying. You need to define how many parameters you are passing to your function. So this 4 is telling the function that, okay, expect 4 arguments. So if you count here, we have 2, 4, 5, 8. How many arguments we have? Exactly 4. Right? So this is also what variadic function does. So if I have 7 now here, so I need to define 7 argument here. Right? I need to define 7 argument here. Let me just randomly add numbers here. So I need to define 7 argument. So this tells the function that I'm passing 7 argument. So the function will now go over all this argument here and perform whatever my function is supposed to perform on this argument here. So, but what if I pass in 6 here? If I pass in 6 here, but as you can see, I'm passing 7 parameter here, but I'm telling the function that my argument is what is 6. So what will happen? What will happen is this: it will only consider the first 6 elements. It will disregard the last one. That's what will happen here. And also, if I should say 8 here now, if I should tell the function that I'm passing 8 parameters while I'm passing 7 here, what will happen is it will select this, and then the remaining element that is remaining, since it's 8 here, it's going to give it 0 or a random value. Any random value from the memory, you're just going to give it that. You're just going to print that for you. Okay, so let's see an example now. Let's see an example. Let's say I want to, let me just create a simple function, a simple variadic function, and let's try printing what is in that variable, or what is stored in that function parameter, what that function parameter is. So let's say I'll call it let me just call it sum again. So like I said, this is a variadic function. Let me call it arg. So then dot here. So now I'm defining the function. So here, sorry, I declared the function. Now let me define the function. So here I can say int arg, right, dot. This is the function prototype, right? So here, what I should do is this. There are some things that you need to know about variadic functions. The first thing, we have what is called the var list. We also have what is called the var start. these are all macros in variadic function. They make things very, very easy. And we have what is called the vararg, and we also have what is called the varend. So these are the 4 functions, or let me say 4 macros you need to know. As far as you'll understand how all these things work, then you have no problem with variadic functions. Varlist, varstart, vararg, and varend. These are the function or macros that you need to know. So before you use all these macros here, you have to import, or you have to include the standard library for variadic function. This library contains the definition of all these macros here. So you cannot use this without including the library. So this is the library here. So hash include, the library name is stdarg.h. So this is the library that will allow you to use variadic functions here. So now I have a function here. I'm trying to declare a function that will print, or that will help me print whatever argument is passed to the function, right? So the first thing you need to do is to declare a variable that will hold this argument here. Whatever the argument that is passed here, you have to declare a variable that will hold it. So, and that variable that will hold this argument is declared using the varlist. So that's the function of the varlist. Okay, the type, this is just like the varlist is just like the type of the argument of your variable, and it contains the information necessary to work with a variable list of argument. So that's just this. So let's say let me call my variable, what should I call it? Let me call it argument. Let's say this is the name of variable, and this variable here will hold the parameters that is passed to the function here. So now my argument stores the element or the data or everything that is passed to the function, right, as parameters. So the next thing is the varstart here. So what does the varstart do? The varstart actually initializes the variable you declared here, right? So you need to initialize varstart here, the variable. Another example, let me just show you something. We all know that the time I called this function sum, I passed in, the first thing I passed in was what? Was the number of argument, right? Let's assume 2 here is the number of argument, right? So I need to initialize this to my argument here. I need to tell the argument where it should begin the storing, where it should begin storing the argument, right? Which argument should be stored first. So here, in this case, the thing you need to do here is to pass in the variable name in which you are storing your argument, which is this, in my own case, argument. So I will pass in argument here. So when I pass in argument here, then a comma, then the next thing you need to pass to it is what it should initialize this argument with. So in this case here, I will initialize it with arg. Why is it arg? You are supposed to initialize it with anything that comes before the before the ellipsis here. That's just it. Whatever that comes before the ellipsis here is what you are to declare, or is what you are to initialize with your argument here. So in this case, I have only this. There are cases that will have 3 arguments, including the ellipsis. So you need to pass the one that is next or before the ellipsis here, which is arg in this case here. So I need to pass this now. So here I will simply say arg. So now I have initialized this. Why is arg initialized here? It means that the argument here, which is the variable that is taking the number that will store this variable or this argument here, is initialized with the value arg. And if you can look at this, is the same thing here. This is the argument, right? And this is the parameters that are passed to the function. So that's just what this does here. So the next thing here is this vararg here. So what does vararg does? This vararg is a macro which is used to loop over entire argument that is passed to the function. So if you have a list of arguments, let's say let's just a simple example, this argument here, 3 and 4 here. So vararg is responsible for going through all of this argument, 3, 4. If I have 10 of them, it will go from the first element up to the 10th element. That's just what it does. Vararg is responsible for pulling each of these elements one by one at a time. It works on this element one at a time. That's what vararg does here. So what vararg does, like I explained, is just used to pull the element and work on them one by one. So what you need to pass to vararg as its own parameter is this. You need to pass in the variable name. In this case, this is argument, right? And then since I said vararg is responsible for looping, or let me say for pulling up all these elements one by one and working on them, then you need to specify to vararg which type of element you are trying to access. In this case, I'm trying to access integers, right? These are integer values, so I need to tell it that I'm interested in checking an int. So it means that if I have any other data types here, if I have cars, strings, it's not going to check them, right? It's not going to check them, because from here I passed it that I'm only checking for int. Do you get it? So that's what vararg does here. So the next thing is this varend. This varend is just like terminating vararg, whatever vararg. Since I said vararg is just looping, right, going through all the elements. So when you use varend, it's just like you are telling your compiler that, okay, this is the end of my variadic function. This is where I want all the looping, all the everything to stop. So you need to pass your the arguments that you declared here. That's what you need to pass to it. Sorry, the variable. So I need to do something like argument here. So these are just the functions you need to know about this variadic function. The var list, which I said is used to declare the variable that will hold the argument, and then the var start, which is used to initialize the variable, right? And I said it takes in a parameter which is the variable before the ellipsis, right? And then we said the vararg is used to pull in the argument one by one, right, stored in the argument variable in my own case here. And then the varend, like I said, is used to end all this looping, or all everything about this variadic function. You are just telling it that, okay, this is the end of everything I'm doing about a variadic function. Let's say I have a function, let's say to find, I'm just trying to come up with a simple function that we can use. I just want to explain more example outside the project on ALX variadic function before we begin solving the project on ALX variadic function. I just want to develop another example to see how we can solve problems on variadic function. Okay, let's say I want to sum up two numbers. Okay, I want to sum up two numbers. This is the function prototype, right? So, and here, or let me say I want to sum up numbers, not just two numbers, any number that is passed to the function. So here I need to pass in what? Int. Let me just call it AR for argument this time. So I'll pass in dot 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 here. This is the function what? This is the function prototype. So let me define the function here. So int sum. So this is int AR, right? Then dot dot dot. All right. So I said I want to write a function that will sum up whatever parameter is passed to this function. As you can see here, we don't have fixed variable, fixed number of arguments. It can change. It's changeable, right? So I want anything that is passed to this function here, I want it to be summed together, and at the end I want to print the sum. Okay, that's just what I want to do now. So the first thing I'm going to do is, we all know that we need to declare this variable varList, right? We said varList is responsible for holding the argument passed. So let me call this arg here in this case. So arg is responsible for holding the parameter passed here. So now I need to initialize arg, right? So I now say var start. So I'll pass in arg, and then what I said, it will take in the variable before the ellipsis, right? So in this case it is AR here. So what next? So the next thing is this. We have var end, right? Before var end, we all know that there is var arg, right? So here what should be var end? This should be arg like this. All right. So here I said I want to what? I want to print the sum of all the parameters that are passed to this function here. So we all know that vararg, like I explained, what vararg does, it goes through each of these elements and pull them out one by one, right? So vararg is just like a loop, right? Vararg is just like a loop. So all I'm going to do here is I can declare a variable also that will go over the element of arg, because arg here stores the element, right? The parameter passed to it. So I need to go over all of the elements in arg, and then I'll be summing them for each iteration. So I need to declare a variable I here for the looping, and then I will declare another variable, let's say sum, to hold the sum, right? This will hold sum. let me initialize sum also to be equals to 0. So this will hold sum, right? The summation. So all I need to do here is this. I will now say sum is equals to sum plus, right? Since I'm changing the value of sum initially is 0, right? And whatever the value is, I want to store it in sum. Okay, sorry, before that I need to use a loop. I forgot to create the loop. So I have to create a loop for I equals to 0. I should be less than what? What should be the condition? My I should be less than AR. AR here is the number of argument passed to the function, right? So I cannot loop and exceed the number of argument I'm supposed to go through, right? So this has to be less than AR, then I plus plus. So now this will loop over everything of this arg for me, right? So what I'm going to do next here is this. I will now say sum here is equals to sum plus. So now I will use var arg to pull out each of the element passed to this function parameter, passed to this function as parameter. So for each of the elements, it's going to add it to sum, right? And then the loop will increment, and then it will pull the next element again and add it to sum. That's how it will keep doing this. So I will now say var arg here, right? So here var arg, I need to pass in the variable name, right, which is arg in this case. And then what should I pass to this? I'm checking for integers, right? I'm checking for integers since I'm summing int numbers, right? So I need to pass in int here. So now I have this, right? So at the end, I can simply just say printf. No, not here. It's supposed to be outside the loop. So this is supposed to be printf. At the end, after all the looping, it should print what? It should print the sum. So here I need to pass sum here. So this is supposed to be the function here. So this loop here will iterate over what? Over this element here, because the number AR here is the number of parameters. So you need to tell the loop where it should stop, right? I'm sure you understood this here. So for each iteration, I want sum to increment with the value of int, right? For each element of arg, I want to add that element to sum here. So like I said, var arg here is responsible for fetching all the elements in arg one by one. Okay, so it will fetch them one by one. That's just what var arg does. So for each of the elements it fetch, it's going to add it to sum. Okay, so let's try compiling this. Let's see gcc tests.c. Oops, sorry, did I miss something? Gcc test.c. What's this saying? Okay, yeah, I missed something. Okay, I defined it, I did not call it anywhere. Okay, so I forgot my main function here. So int main here void, right? So all I need to do here is simply call the function sum here. So I'll just say sum. I will pass in the parameter. Let's say I have 4 here, right? So I pass in 1 2 3 4 here. So what am I expecting this to print? 4 plus 3 is 7, 7 plus 2 is 9, 9 plus 1 is 10, right? I'm expecting 10 to be printed in this case. So let's see gcc test.c. Let me call it t. Okay, I missed a semicolon here. Okay, yeah, so let's run it again. So let's run the compile file. So as you can see, I got what? The value 10, right? So what happened here is this. Like I said, arg here in this case, which is the variable that stores the number of, or that stores the element passed to the function, is going to be iterated by this var arg. So var arg is going to go through each element of this arg, and for each element of the arg here, I want to add it to sum here. That's just what this is saying. So the moment I call the function here, the first parameter here, it knows that this is the number of argument, because I've already declared it here in start, var start. I already told var start that okay, arg here should be initialized with the number of parameters. So that's why this is considered first, and it will not take this as part of your argument. It's not going to take this as part of the numbers you are trying to sum. It knows that the first one here is an argument. Is the number of argument that is passed. So it will just sum the remaining values. So if I should change this now to 6, for instance, if I should change this to 6, and let me add just one parameter here to it. So if I have one, if I add one, as you can see here, we have 5 arguments instead of 6. So what will happen in this case, or before that, let's make it 6. Let me add 6 here. Let's make it 6. So let's compile. So as you can see, we got 21. So what if I remove this here, the last one here? If I should remove the last one here, so let's run it. As you can see, I got 15. So it will not sum including this here, right? It will not sum including this. Did you get it? It's not going to sum including this. So that's it. Okay, so if I should have now, if I have let's say 7, and how many parameters is here? 1 2 3 4 5, right? So I'm expecting this to print 15, right? So let's see what we will get printed. So GCC, we got a random value, right? We got a random value. So that's what will happen in this case here. You are passing an argument that exceeds, you are telling the function that this is the number of argument, but your argument, it's not up to that number of argument that you're passing to the function. So like I said, it's going to give you just a random value. Let's try printing this. Instead of printing the sum, let's try printing everything here. Let's just print the values, not just the sum here. So all I need to do here is, let me delete this. So for each iteration here, I'm not trying to sum now. I want to print each of the element here. So I will just say printf here. I will say %d/n, right? So here I will now say vararg. I will pass in vararg as the parameter. So I'm fetching what? An int, right? So this should be an int here. So for each iteration, it's going to print the element, right? It's going to print the element. So let me just comment out this part here, since I've already, yeah. So let's see what will happen. So as you can see, we got the element printed. 1 2 3 4 5, right? Let me open the file. Cat, what's the file name? Test.c, right? Okay, so here, as you can see, we pass in 7 as the parameter, right? We passed 7 as the number of arguments. Sorry, we passed 7 as the number of arguments. So, and we have how many arguments? 1 2 3 4 5. We have 5 arguments. So as you can see, it's got the first 5 printed, right? And the 6th element, like since you are telling it that the arguments are 7, the 6th element, as you can see, is just initializes it to 0, and the 7th element is just a random number. So it will just randomly select any number, okay, and assign it to you. It will just assign any random number to you if you are telling the function the number of argument that is more than the number of argument you are passing. That's what will happen. So what if I do something like this now? If I should reduce this, if I should say instead of 7, let's make this 4 here. So how many argument do I have? I have 5. So what should happen in this case? I'm expecting not to get 5 printed here. I'm expecting to get the first 4 argument printed, right? So let me compile. So let's compile this, let's run it. So as you can see, we got 1 2 3 4. Only the first 4 elements are printed in this case.